This is The Speaking Show. I'm David Newman, and you're tuned in to the #1 podcast for speakers, consultants, and experts who want to speak more profitably. Diane Mulcahy, DianeMulcahy.com, the gig economy. Welcome to The Speaking Show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, David.
This topic is hot and only getting hotter. The gig economy. Tell us, how did that become a subject of study and of interest to you? And sort of let's talk first about what brought you to write the book.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think from my first job out of college, I started working a full-time consulting job like so many college graduates. And I remember somebody telling me, kind of giving me advice before my first job and saying, the key is when you get into that job, look around you, look up and see whose job you want so you know what to go for. And I remember getting into that job and looking around and thinking, I don't want any of these jobs. I don't actually like working this way. I don't like coming to an office every day. I don't like doing only one thing. I much preferred the life I had in college where I had different subjects, different things going on, and it was much more of a portfolio. So I think ever since my first job, I've been really in the back of my mind thinking, is there a better way to work? Is there a different way to work than having a full-time job and being a full-time employee? And I remember I read an article in which the term, the gig economy, was used. And I just had one of those moments where I had goosebumps on my arms. And I thought, my God, that is the name of the thing that I have been thinking about, this idea that you can work independently, that you can create a portfolio of work, and that you can include things that you find challenging, interesting. You can charge for things, you can do things pro bono. You can really create whatever mix of work is perfect for you. And from then on, it was off to the races.
You pretty much caught this at the perfect time. We were just talking about this right before we turned on the microphone, because you're right. I mean, it was sort of an emerging thing. And then the book came out in 2016?
Yeah, the book came out at the end of 2016. And the book really grew out of an MBA course that I had created and was teaching at Babson College here in Boston at the time. So shortly after I read that article, I was like, I want to explore this topic. And I put together a syllabus and started teaching this course at Babson. And after teaching it for a few years and really learning, what were the topics that mattered to my students? What were the topics that resonated? What were the assignments and exercises that worked the best? I sort of pulled together all of that into a book.
Yeah. Now, let's just talk about some of the pros and cons, because, you see all kinds of things in the media about, hey, no one has a real job anymore, no more health benefits, no more retirement, no more stability. And that's obviously one side of the story. And there's so many benefits that you write about, obviously, in the book, and that you've already mentioned in your own personal experience, having the portfolio of activities, having more freedom, having more variety, having your own sort of self-insured career, right? If you're only relying on yourself and your ability to get the gigs and do the gigs that you want. When you talk to, let's say, different generations of audiences, I'm guessing that the baby boomers and the Generation X people are freaked out by the gig economy, and the Gen Y and the millennial crowd is like, well, what else is there? That's kind of how we're growing up, is that in college, I'm driving for Uber, and then I'm doing Domino's pizza delivery, and I'm over here doing my campus job on campus at my school. How do you think this is rolling out as far as acceptance and as far as people looking at it either positively or negatively?
Wow. So there's a lot there. So let me try to parse some of that. I think in terms of the initial issues that you raised around stability and benefits, some of what I think people perceive as the negatives of the gig economy. Let's start there. I've talked to a lot of independent workers and full-time employees as part of researching my book and just the work that I do. And what I would say is there really is no security or stability in our economy, even if you're a full-time employee. So if you have a full-time job, I know that people feel like they're secure and they're stable, but the reality is that they're not, because look around. I mean, at any time, you could be laid off, downsized, right-sized, outsourced, offshored. Companies are constantly pivoting. They're moving into different markets. They're introducing new products. They're reducing this team. They're hiring in this other team. So I feel like our economy is so competitive and dynamic, and companies really don't offer any kind of loyalty, career path, longevity. That's not what they're presenting as an option to most employees. So I feel like there really isn't security in our economy in general. It's not specific to the gig economy, but I can understand where people perceive that to be the case. I think in terms of benefits, that really is an issue. When you're a full-time employee, you have access to employer-based benefits, many of which are subsidized, some of which, like health insurance, are massively federally subsidized. So when you leave full-time employment, whether that's by choice or because you have to work independently, you really do lose those benefits and protections. That's really a policy issue. We have a labor market which is designed to reward full-time employment. And if you are not a full-time employee by choice or because you have to, you're essentially penalized for that choice. You start to lose benefits, protections, rights that are only awarded to full-time employees. I would say that fortunately for independent workers today, the Affordable Care Act has really stepped in, and it's certainly not perfect, but it has really presented a viable alternative for many independent workers to access health insurance without having to have a full-time job. Similarly, for retirement savings, you're actually better off as an independent worker because you can save much more and much faster than an employee for retirement. So it's a more nuanced view, but I would say that we do have a policy issue about figuring out how we want to treat independent workers and whether we want to continue to penalize people for not having a full-time job.
Hey, good looking. Are you currently getting paid to speak? Would you like to ramp that up? We can help. Book a confidential speaker strategy call with our team at doitmarketing.com/call, and let's see what we might do together. The call is free, but the results may be priceless. I just want to kind of flip this over because a lot of folks listening are obviously speakers, experts, consultants, solopreneurs, freelancers, and we're living in the gig economy. We created the gig economy, right? We talk about speaking. It's like, what's a speaking opportunity? It's called a speaking gig. What's the job of most speakers? It's not to do the gig, it's to get the gig. So in what sort of ways do you think for, the solopreneur, speaker, consultant, because I know you also do some consulting with product and service companies that want to help the solopreneur, the gig economy worker with, what do they want? What do they need? What kind of products and services would help support that lifestyle and that work style? We've always been part of the gig economy as consultants and speakers and trainers and coaches. Are there some trends that might blindside us because we're doing it the way we did it in 1995 or 2000 or 2005, and now fast forward to 2019, 2020, 2021? Have the gigs themselves changed, or have the buyers somehow commoditized us because, graphic design, go to Fiverr, get that for $5. Speaking engagement, we used to pay $10,000, $15,000. Now we'll just pay someone, $500. A lot of things have become commoditized because of the software platforms available to us to connect with gig workers, whether that's writing, graphic design, articles, web design, a lot of these creative gig industries have really been commoditized by the platforms. Do we risk that as thought leaders and as speakers and professors and so on?
Well, I think that's an important question. And it's important to emphasize, the gig economy is definitely not just on-demand workers. And it really does include a lot of thought leaders, speakers, authors, freelancers, consultants, advisors, et cetera. So that's a good point to emphasize. In terms of, I do think obviously the ecosystem has changed. So if you were a speaker 10 or 15 years ago, it definitely looks different now. I think, technology has stepped in and removed a lot of the friction that used to be in the marketplace. So it's now much easier to find gigs. It's much easier for people who have gigs to find independent workers to perform whatever task or project or assignment they're looking for. So, technology has really facilitated the growth of the gig economy. I also think technology, I know that, so you're saying that it's become commoditized, and I think that has happened in some parts of the marketplace. But I also think that, and if you've been out in the gig economy and if you've tried to hire or work with independent contractors, I think this will ring true, that you still have to pay for quality. So while it's possible to go on to Fiverr or go on to any kind of platform or even Craigslist and get somebody to do the thing that you want to get done, if you have a specific quality that you're looking for or a particular set of skills or experiences or a perspective, then you still have to find the right person. And depending on what you want done, you still have to pay for that if you want expertise and experience brought to your project or task. And what we've seen is there are a variety of platforms that have popped up to address the quality issue. So, you have platforms like Fiverr and Upwork, which are quite broad and quite generalist. And then you have more specific platforms like Catalent, which really focuses on independent workers that were previously with big blue chip consulting firms, generally have MBAs, and they have to prove those things in order to even get onto the platform. So you're really dealing with a much more curated pool of independent contractors. The same with a platform like TopTal or 10X or BTG. Those are all looking for either, very experienced senior level workers or executive level workers. So I think the quality bar is still there. And I really don't think that everything has been commoditized. I just think you have to know where to look.
How about that? Very interesting. So we're gonna link up some of those great recommendations in the show notes, as well as, of course, taking people, Diane, back to your website, your book, all of those great things as well. So thank you for sharing those links. That'll be great. I want to do a little inside baseball here. So you, as the speaker, as the thought leader, you've done something really interesting that I actually recommend that my clients don't do, but it seems to have worked out really well for you, where you've got two very distinct areas of expertise. And right on your website, when people go to DianeMulcahy.com, we can look at all your brilliance around the gig economy, and we can also look at all your brilliance around private equity and venture capital. So you're kind of riding two ponies at once, seemingly very, very successfully. How did you come to that decision that you really want to set up sort of two camps of expertise that you write about, speak about, consult on, and are very active and successful in?
I like the image of riding two ponies at once. I'm still visualizing that. It's interesting. My web design folks, I had a hard time with that. They were like, we don't understand necessarily how to lay this out. This is not a common thing. So I can understand why you tell your clients to stay in lane. In many ways, it's much simpler and easier to understand. I think for me, I already had been in private equity. I was a professional investor for 15 years and had already done quite a bit of writing and speaking about topics related to private equity. It's a very niche area. I have deep expertise. So it made absolutely no sense to kind of make this an either or situation and force myself to pick. It seemed, first of all, the most interesting to me, again, to be able to do a diverse range of things in my work life, including in different industries. So I was pretty committed to keeping everything if I could. And I've continued to work in private equity. And then I have added on the gig economy work, I would say slowly over time. So it started, as I mentioned, by teaching this MBA course, which really was a side gig. I mean, I was doing that as an adjunct lecturer, very part-time. And then I put together the book proposal, and then I was writing the book. And that took more time, but it was still in addition to the investing work that I was doing. And now it's become, I do basically the same kinds of work, meaning writing, speaking, teaching, and consulting. I just do them in two different areas of expertise, subject areas that I feel very comfortable talking about, operating within, have deep expertise. So to me, it's created a nice diverse portfolio, which is great for all kinds of reasons. And people in the gig economy, I think, understand multiple streams of income and diversification. And I think just intellectually, it's where I want to be, having, a variety of projects going on in my professional life.
Well, you're living the message, right? You're living the business model that you write about and study and teach.
I'm walking the talk.
That's it. That is it. So I'm just going to dip my little baby toe into the private equity side because I think that's also fascinating. I think a lot of people listening probably don't know the difference between these two terms, venture capital and private equity. What's the difference? How does that work when a startup company wants to get funding? Who do they go to whom for?
So I think I'll start with venture capital because I feel like more people are familiar with that. So venture capital is, as you suggest, the equity financing for startup companies. So if you're an early stage company, you need money to grow, you go to a venture capitalist and you basically sell a minority piece of your company in exchange for the capital. So equity in exchange for capital. Private equity differs really in the stage of company. So private equity investors look to invest in companies that are much later stage. They're up and running, they have a product or service, they're already out in the market, they're generating revenues, and most of the time they're generating profits. So much later stage of development. Private equity investors also generally take a control position. So they take a majority position in the company, not a minority position like venture capitalists. At a high level, those are the main differences.
Interesting. Wow. Really, really fascinating. Now, do some groups play in both pools, or are they really bifurcated that you have a VC firm and that's all they do, and then you have a private equity firm and that's all they do?
Generally speaking, they're bifurcated because it's a different approach to be a minority investor versus a control investor. It's also a very different ecosystem that you're playing in. So VCs are in the world of startups, ideas, companies that maybe have revenues, probably don't have profits, maybe don't even have revenues. Whereas private equity professionals are looking at established companies already out in the market, and they really need maybe operational changes at the company to make them better performers. So it's a very different kind of business that they're looking at.
Interesting. Very, very cool. Well, let's go back to the gig economy. I want to ask you, just because I know that one of the final sections of the book is about the future of the gig economy, looking at it from where you've seen the developments over the last couple of years and all of your studying and teaching and consulting around this. Where do you see the future of the gig economy today and going forward?
I mean, honestly, I think the thesis has only gotten stronger. My initial view in the book, based on my research, was the gig economy is here, it's here to stay, and it's growing. And I think that absolutely has proven to be true. There are a lot of empirical and industry and academic research that's been done to show that that's the case. And I think, one companies are looking at structuring their work and their workforce differently, and the gig economy helps them do that. But I think even more importantly, traditional work is ripe for disruption. There's a lot of things about the way that we work as full-time employees and full-time jobs that isn't working for a lot of people. There's a lot of pain points in traditional work. If you interview employees, they are, unhappy, they're not engaged, they're not satisfied, they waste time when they're at the office, they're not completely productive, they sit in expensive real estate. There's all kinds of issues with the way we structure work. And I think there are a lot of people who are looking for a way to work differently, better in some ways, more productively, in a more engaged way where they're happier, but also more autonomously. People are like, why am I sitting in a car 2 hours a day when I can work just as efficiently or maybe more efficiently at home or in a WeWork space? Why am I sitting at a cube all day waiting until the end of the day to leave, like subject to FaceTime and office politics and all that, when I should really be working when I work best to do my best work? And that might mean getting up super early and then, exercising in the middle of the day. So it's becoming harder and harder, I think, for people to accept the traditional constraints of a traditional full-time job. And the gig economy might not be the perfect or the ultimate answer, but it's certainly providing a really attractive alternative for people who want to work differently. And I think the more people are looking around and seeing it as a viable alternative and seeing people doing it and the benefits that they're realizing, the more they're thinking, hey, I want some of that. And the more that companies are out competing for talent. I talk to HR leaders all the time and business leaders, and they're like, here's what I can tell you. My competition, I just lost 3 employees and they just took jobs that allow them to work from home or to work flexibly. Like, this is what people want. So in order to be a client of choice for talent, companies have to adapt. So I think those pressures aren't going away. And I think if we have a conversation in 3 or 5 years, this will be even a more prevalent way of working. That's my prediction.
What a great episode. Wowza. Tell you what, if you want to ramp up your revenue as an expert who speaks professionally, you should really check out our free online training at doitmarketing.com/webinar. I also want to mention just something that's really interesting when we talk about things like job security that you mentioned near the top of our interview and, saving for retirement, benefit plans, etc. A lot of folks are retiring from their quote unquote traditional job and they're coming back into the gig economy. When they're in their, 60s, late 60s, early 70s, they're not done working, but they might be done with a traditional job. And especially now people are living longer. Some of the money's not lasting as long. So some people, either by choice or by necessity, are coming back in their older years and their golden years, so to speak, to rejoin the gig economy. And it's a whole new world. Is that exciting? Is that terrifying? What's the finger on the pulse of the older gig economy worker?
I'm glad you brought that up because I think there's a general perception that the gig economy is all about millennials. And millennials are going out and they're working really side gigs. And that's definitely true. They are doing that. And some of them are doing that because they're under crushing debt from student loans. And others are doing it because they just want to earn extra money, or they're taking on side gigs that allow them to pursue something they really care about, which they're not able to do in their sort of full-time job. And certainly we see for Gen Xers, for kind of mid-career employees, they're taking on side gigs, I would say most often to experiment with starting a business on their own. So they've had a career, they've been working in whatever industry, and in the back of their mind, they're thinking, can I go out on my own? Can I do this independently? Can I take control of my career and my financial life and create my own business? So they're doing side gigs like millennials, but with a different intent and in a more experimental way. I think for baby boomers, the gig economy really has come along at exactly the right time because, as we all know, corporate pensions have gone away. So there are a lot of baby boomers that are entering retirement age, but without the retirement finances that generations used to have when they had a corporate pension for the rest of their lives. So you have people that have worked for 30 or 40 years, they're in their 60s or 70s, they want to stop working full time, but they maybe don't have the financial wherewithal to do that. The gig economy really presents a viable alternative. It allows them to remain active and engaged, which is what a lot of retirees want. They don't want to stop working and go sit on a golf course or a beach for the next 20 years. They really want to remain active. And it also gives them a way to continue to earn income, but importantly, without having to rely on somebody to give them a job. And I think we're all familiar with kind of the ageism that exists in the traditional workplace. And the gig economy really presents retirees with an opportunity to create their own work life, however much or however little they want to work, and continue to earn income and continue to stay active. So it's been a real boom for that generation in particular.
Yeah, very exciting times ahead. Well, let's tell people how they can get connected and stay connected to more Diane and more wisdom and resources and goodies tied to the gig economy. Where can we send people? And we'll just tie up all these in the show notes down below when people go to thespeakingshow.com. But where can we send people for more Diane?
I would send them to my website, which is dianemulcahy.com. I would recommend, if you want to stay in touch and just keep up with what's going on in the gig economy, I have a monthly newsletter that has articles that I write, some curated news, upcoming events, things like that. And you can sign up for that on my website. And I'm also on Twitter at Diane Mulcahy.
Awesome. Well, Diane, thank you so much. I'm really, really glad that we had a chance to talk today. And we'll have to have you back as the gig economy evolves. And maybe, we'll look back historically and we'll say, yeah, remember that crazy job economy?
That would be amazing. We could take clips from this show and see what happened in 3 to 5 years.
We'll be like gig economy archaeologists.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And we will reconnect soon.
Thanks for having me.
Well, that wraps up another episode of The Speaking Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on iTunes. Subscribe. Tell a friend. Go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thespeakingshow.com. See you next time.